And I want to add to that part before we lose that. You mentioned that the person who was working in McDonald's for so long, right? I'm really like, I start to think like, you could still find a huge opportunity there, right? Like say, for example, you just love what you do and you're by far the most loved employee. Your internal team sees it. Just doing the hard work, doing whatever is in the way, if anything, builds rapport and gets the job done, right? I know what you mean. I've actually done that several times with a couple of posts that I was supposed to share, and it was imperfect, but I just shared it anyway, and it worked. It worked. So
Right.
yeah.
Which kind of goes back to the feedback loop, right? We're just trying to err on the side of action, right? I think that's what I need to grow in a lot, and I've tried to over the last 5 years
Yeah.
or so, as someone who is very contemplative and wanting to make sense of a lot of things or it feel right before I take action.
100%. I think that's a big feeling, but the fact that you're making the action is still better than no action, right? So I
Right,
like that.
right.
And if anything, we can get the audience aware of what we're speaking about today. Thinking out loud here, we're talking about how do we define success, or more importantly, how has the space defined success? Not us, because there's only one filter, or only one point of view, right? But rather, how do others see success and how have they accomplished it? So we're going to talk about that because, of course, it is Success Open Source Podcast, right? And I think we should sprinkle some success in there, right?
Totally. And I think that's where we're like, this idea of Success Open Source is like we're fleshing it out because it's I think it's something that you brought to me, and we had a lot of alignment on without like truly defining it. But then we've had a lot of recent conversations that were really good about all areas of life, right? All avenues of life, not just in business. And at the end of the day, we want to win in all of those avenues. And so we can dig in there, but been some good conversations. I'm excited to kind of keep those flowing here just organically, and maybe something we say will appeal to someone who's like wondering about success, or maybe they feel like they're chasing quote unquote success from like a, income, possessions type of thing. And maybe that's not the full story here.
Exactly. I love that you mentioned that because sometimes we define success the wrong way, and people who can be seen as successful are hitting all the marks but still don't feel happy, and then they're just moving themselves closer to a depressed life. And I thought I might as well share a story before we talk about some of these perspectives of the successful and how they achieve success. There was a book called Blink, right? I'm not sure if you read that one, but the first chapter, it spoke about a study that was conducted on gamblers, right? And what they did was they gave the gamblers two different piles, a red pile and a blue pile of cards. And what they were doing was they were every time you would kind of pull these cards, if you get a high number, you kind of get money. If you get a low number, that's a specific area or in a range, you get a negative, a deficit, right? You lose money. So they start kind of like watching everything about the gambler, right? The way they sweat, the way they think, the way they react. Like they're recording their progress. And what they've noticed was that within the first 10 tries, their bodies made a change. Like their body reaction physically made a change. And then by the time they hit 80 times or 80 tries, they figured out the key or the secret of how to win more and more and more, right? So the whole point of that study was that our brain, after trial and error, can find the secret sauce or ingredient to success or winning if we're around or iterate enough. In this case, it was 80 tries. However, what they shared was that at the first 10 tries, the body started having reactions of what was working and what wasn't working before the brain or the conscious realized it. So the subconscious started finding out like, hey, maybe I should do this instead, right? And it's so funny because like the study was highlighting that there's two different brains, and if you're around a subject long enough, your subconscious will start guiding you toward the right direction for you, the conscious mind, to realize, hey, I see what's going on here. Now I got it. Right. And I thought that's such a cool lesson. And it says enough. If you see what other people are doing that are successful and you're seeing how they're applying it, enough so that your body will start to, or your mind will start to take it in, and then you will unknowingly recreate that, right? It's like you plant the right seeds and bear the right fruit. And that's if anything, a shortcut to success. What's that saying? It says, if you are the 5 people you're around with, and if they're all successful, you're seeing that.
Surround yourself with wolves and you have to become one.
Exactly. That's
right?
a good one.
And I really like that. We talk about environment a lot. We talk a lot about relationships and who you're around. Like, you and I push each other. Like, I know you and I both wouldn't be in the same exact spot if we weren't connected on a daily basis, trying to help each other be better husbands, be better dads, be better entrepreneurs.
100%.
And so I think it's just crucial, man. I couldn't go at it alone. I think that's the biggest key here. I love that springboard here into, like, what does success look like with other people in life? I did do a quick, not ChatGPT. I use Perplexity to kind of pull in some resources here, and I got some quotes on success. But then I'm like, okay, how do people? What's the common here that people? How are they defining success? And I've got 4 or 5 here, and I'm just gonna read them, and you rank them from 1 to 5, how much you agree with it, and then maybe we'll expand a little bit. First one: success is not just about money, but about personal fulfillment and happiness.
I think that's true because we've heard so many times. What's this? James Clear's mentioned that he says if your habits in some areas of your life are clean and organized, it starts to reflect in other areas of your life. So if you're looking at your relationships, I feel like if you're like, hey, although I'm not financially successful, I am great in my relationships and how I nurture it with family or friends. You could start to bring that off to other areas of your life. So I think that's a good one. It doesn't hit hard though.
Yeah, I'd give it a 3 out of 5. I mean, it still puts kind of, it's not complete, right? And it's not about just happiness or money. I think it's right on the money part for sure. The next one is success is achieved through hard work, perseverance, and learning from failures.
I think that's a good point, right? I think that reminds me of what was it? It wasn't Napoleon Hill. It was someone else who was reading or highlighting Napoleon Hill's book, and he says, for him, success is the steps toward the person you want to become, right? And you mentioned, like, as you start to fail and do the work, that's really what success is, I feel like. So I like that one. That reminds me of something else I've heard, and it just linked. So that's perfect.
Yes. If you're not learning from what is deterring you from who you're becoming, which it's probably even a bigger step. Like, who is it you want to become? Who is it you're called to become? And it's so easy to drift for certain periods of time. And I think that's one of my biggest fears in life is you drift for 5-10 years. You're like, dang it, I missed it. Or like I wasn't intentional there. Or like my head was so underwater, I didn't raise up. Or I was so in the woods, I didn't pull out of the forest to see what path I was 100%. Going in. Right? I love that there of like learning from failures means you're intentional about like, okay, what went wrong here?
I love that.
I think that's huge.
Really, really good. If anything, what are some examples of people who apply that? Right? Like, I hear so many times, and this was the most recent I've heard about recently. It was Dan Coe, right? His story of being a web designer or a graphic designer and a freelancer. He's taken that identity and didn't succeed. So then he started learning about copywriting. Then he started learning about web design. Then he started learning about all these other areas. And he felt for a minute that he was chasing shiny object syndrome. But what he realized was he was taking on the pieces of, I guess, the skill sets and stack them to become the person he is today, right? And I'm like that. So in reality, like as you're pushing through and you're failing, in reality, it's not really failing. You're kind of gearing up for the next round.
Sometimes it's just improper expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like I do always like Gary Vee's story where he's like he worked and served his parents' wine store till he was 36, bro. 36, and you have 18-year-olds feeling like they've missed their prime, like, because I'm not. And so he's like, are you want to do that thing because it's gonna make a lot of money, or because you love it? And I think the deep love is when it's like around your gifting and there's a need for it. So he's big on how do you monetize your passion. And it doesn't always have to be monetizing. Yeah. One of my favorite stories, you know this guy, right? We used his cold email tool for a while, and he's probably making 6 figures a month. Like, just great product, great support. He even taught you how to really use it, like a great course around it, how to delegate. But then he realized, like, he just didn't want to just build a whole thing that pushed cold outreach, right? So he felt like he lost sight, and it kind of just became about more and more stacking money. And then he just turned it off. He turned the tool off. You know, people would keep paying him. He turned it off. He said, I'm switching ship. I'm joining this new group. I'm creating this new group. I really want to build a community that is about purpose over profit. It doesn't mean your purpose can't be profitable, but I'm going this route of let's figure out how to have missional partners in business.
That's true.
And it was something at church spoke to him, and I think God was really working on his heart. And so that was really cool to see, really inspiring for me early on as I was trying to get clients. I was like, oh man, like getting that early on to where you're always trying to keep that bigger picture.
I like that. I wish he sold it instead of just turning it off. That made me feel like I should go back. Like, I was like, no, you shouldn't have sold it. But that's so true though. Like, sometimes you hear, what's that saying? But Alex Hormozy highlighted this story recently. When he paid Warren Buffett for an hour of his time, and he asked him, what allowed you to succeed? And he says, well, the best way I can explain that is through a story. And his story was, when he got out of college, he was always neck and neck with a college mate, right? And that college mate was a high achiever. Like, they were doing great things. If anything, he kind of dwarfed Warren's activities. And they both graduated top of their class, really great at doing what they're doing. And they kind of splintered off into 2 different industries. And as they went out to these different industries, years later, he looked back and Warren looked back and said, okay, well, that guy should be really killing it now because I'm doing good, right? And he looked back and he sees that, oh, wow, like, he's doing great, but he's not doing as good as Warren Buffett, right? And he says the reason why was, like, sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you row your boat, but it matters what boat you're in, right? So if you're in a big boat and you're able to take on more and achieve a lot more, it makes a big difference. Yeah. So choosing the industry,
dude,
it's important also.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. My first thought when you said that is, bro, who cares? Like, if that's how you define success, I guess. But I don't know. Like, I don't want to squash ambition in myself, like, because I know I'm easy to be like, more doesn't mean better, like, and it can be an excuse not to grow, right? But when are we chasing the wrong thing, or when are we making outward success make us feel better when we could be missing something way smaller?
That's true.
That's what it's you know what I'm saying?
True.
Whether that's, hey, you're like, your relationships, your family's gone astray because you've like made this your God, like, just like all in. This has to be more and more and more because I want to be the top. I don't know that a lot of people are playing that game, but still,
that's true though.
I get what I try to pull the principles from things like that, right? Because we're not all trying to like be Charlie Munger or
exactly
those giants as far as wealth goes. But I think that piggyback here's another one.
Let's go.
Success is about achieving your goals and dreams on your own terms and by your own rules. Agree or disagree?
I agree with that one because that's the freedom. Like, it, like he hears, like, the story we just spoke about right now, like the fact that he's, I guess I can't really say he's tied to that, but you're right. Like, even at a small amount, you're making $1,000 a month, right? The fact that you're free, like, that covers all your bills, and now you can go and hang out with your wife, your little ones. That's a huge success to me, right? So I think I love that. The freedom in that is amazing.
So do you think a 9-to-5 is losing your own terms?
No, because then some people are happy with that, right?
You still make a choice to leave.
Yeah,
or stay.
My wife told me that. She says sometimes you got to realize that people have different, I guess, breaking points and different desires, right? And someone working in the construction field could be very happy with that. They can come home and still be the best dad they can be, right? They can still,
Yeah.
and there's it's just another day, right? But so I don't think it's
Dude, you
horrible.
ever see someone working at McDonald's that just loves their job?
Shit,
It's rare,
I've
but bro, have
seen
you
it.
seen
I've
it?
seen it. Yeah,
It warms my heart,
yeah.
man. I'm like, knowing what you get paid, and you're like, you just excited you get to see your regulars again and serve someone coffee. Like, dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Like, I think it's carrying that humble heart with also like, dude, big things could happen. We could impact a lot of lives. Like, there's that too. Like, if you have an entrepreneurial drive, it's not this like this or that. It's just I think it's more about like posture and intent, plus where what your opportunities are, what you dream of, like what you want to
That's
dream
it.
and what you feel like. For us, it's like what is God leading us to,
That is
right?
it.
So
That is it. And I want to add to that part before we lose that. You mentioned the person who is working in McDonald's for so long, right? I'm really like, I start to think like you could still find a huge opportunity there, right? Like, say for example, you just love what you do and you're by far the most loved employee. Your internal team sees it, your employees seen it, and that's enough if you can see the opportunity there for you to like even create a course about how to master customer service. And that alone can create the freedom in your life to sell that to other training programs, to other McDonald's locations. It can be $30 and it's a pre-recorded thing, but now you can take advantage of those little moments and you're still doing you, right? I think that's someone could be in the construction world or could be holding doors as a doorkeeper and still find success because where they're at, they're taking in lessons, right? And they can share that with someone else. So I like that you mentioned that. I love
yeah.
that. But I think,
And on the relationship front, like depth is really important. Like there's certain things where people go the smaller scale. Like some people work with a handful of clients at high prices, but they're like deeply involved because it's like this. They can deeply involve with rewarding relationships, and they help those different businesses grow. So it's like spokes on the
yes,
wheel.
yes.
That's
No,
pretty
that's
cool.
I have a friend that I saw on Facebook today, Richard Sargent. He was actually one of my first mentors, right? He's the one that introduced me to Frambo Bedoya, right? And today I saw that he was happy that he had less than 500 friends on Facebook. And I was like, whoa, like 500, like that's, but he deleted a bunch of people, right? And he was like, these are all the people that were able to shake hands with and make an impact in their life, right? And I'm like, dang, like that's so true. And I was still on the list because he's made a huge impact, so much so that I can message him right now at midnight and he will give me a lifelong list of advice, right? And I'm like, imagine having that, like just 500 people, but these are all people who love him the same way that I like him, right? Like these are like Richard, right? So, and I think that's like you mentioned right now, that's super impactful. Even though it's small, it makes he can influence all of them, right, in such a way that like that. I think that's more power than anything, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing. It's so there's a lot of just different ways we can see success playing out in life, right? We haven't even hit on like the family side, right? So we talk a lot about, right, kind of top down, like we want our relationship with God and our spouse, our family, business. We want it to all be healthy. So I would love to hear your thoughts on there, but I think we should also, if you were to put just off the top of your head, what success is for you? Let's go ahead and just drop those out. You give one, then I'm going to give one. And then let's talk about the areas of life and how it can kind of compound.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that,
And we're no expert
no,
here, but this is just what we're wrestling with, right? So
100%. I think the first one is just freedom, right? Freedom to do as you will, so that way you're able to make a change. That's literally what I wrote down, and that's the goal I want to move towards, right? So that's my first one right there.
I love how you've been hitting on change and that you put that on
Yeah,
there. Because you could take your definition and say, oh, dude, if I came across lottery money, I had freedom to go buy drugs and
100%.
sit on the couch and
Just chill.
have a good time like
Yeah.
that. I mean, is that really success? but to make change. So expand on the change a little
So
bit
I
there.
feel like this. So there was change in terms of like what the narrative is, right? If you hear right now, you lift up your phone and there's like aliens are coming down, right? Or there's global warming and there's so much fear, and of course that sells a lot more. But I realized like when people are in that zone of like fear, they've become hatred toward they have hatred toward the brother or sister, right? Like when the coronavirus happened, people were so like, stay away from me. And I'm like, dang, how am I supposed to show love? Right. So for me, I've realized that, like we mentioned before, the person who controls content controls perception, right? And for me, the fastest way to change is to help support that content pieces of the people who are already making a difference. I don't want to be the one in charge, but I want to uplift those who have a beautiful voice. Where I've met some amazing pastors, youth pastors, who are all tatted up, right? But who said, you know what? I was a bad kid growing up, and now I'm uplifting my Father in heaven, right? And now I'm being loud for everyone. I want to have a way to support him so he's louder, or her, so that way they can show that, hey, even though you messed up, there's a right path. On the other side too, people who are let's say they're super successful and they realize like, um I realized that I was putting my all into the wrong thing or wrong God or anything, right? And now that just like you said, stopped it all to impact the small ones who wants to make a difference. I want to make the change in them so that way the belief, the culture is changing,
Yeah.
the content
Yeah.
out there. So that's my way of change, just helping people have a better perspective.
Oh, I love perspective. I can remember years ago when I was just starting a business, I started out calling it living proof because we're all living proof of God's love. We're all living in this grand story, right? And I'm like, I want to change people's perspective because I was into filmmaking at the time. Still love filmmaking, but like the power of story to change someone's perspective around an idea that can change the trajectory of their life, bro. It's like sometimes you just need to hear the right, the same thing you're hearing from other people. Sometimes you just need to hear it from the right person, and it clicks and it hits, and it changes your life. Like it can change the trajectory of your life.
100%.
Like that one idea.
Uh,
That's insane to me.
Seriously, a good example.
So
A good
good.
example is like,
Yeah.
if you change one perspective, like you said, maybe, and I've heard this one, that we're watching a show about a murder, right? And it was a husband who was cheating on his wife, and someone mentioned it would be nice if they just didn't exist anymore, and that was enough for him to take his whole family out. Like that one little saying, he took it as maybe I should, and he did it. And I'm like that, and that's in the negative effect, but you can see how
Yeah.
drastic.
Yeah. Sometimes you need those dark extreme examples to realize how important ideas are, right? And so I think spinning on that, because thinking right, we want to think well. My working definition of success, or what I aim for in life, is to live, think, and work productively. And that is productively meaning for the glory of God and the good of others. And so I actually read this definition. I thought it was really good. Success is obedience to God, empowered by the Spirit of God, motivated by love for God, and directed toward the advancement of the kingdom of God, which is loving others, the good of others, right? So if we can stay anchored into the reality that God loves us, that He wants to strengthen us in the craziness of life, and take what I've heard is love is the overflow of joy in God that gladly meets the needs of others.
Oh, that's really cool.
Imagine if you were living that way, bro.
That's pretty cool.
You are so overjoyed in God and the God who loves you that you would just overflow and gladly meet the needs of others. I don't think it always looks like this ecstasy type thing. I think it's more contentment and like a realization. And I think oftentimes we need to act and then the feelings will follow. Because there's times where just selfishness just comes in, man, when you got a lot on your plate, feel like you have no time. I think time's our most valuable resource. And as there's more demands on our life for our time, we can start to feel really frustrated and selfish about it. Like, where's time for me? Where's time for me? And that's been something wrestling with just, early age of kids, just learning how to be realistic and realize that's a gift to give your time away to
Yeah,
people.
that's so true. And I love that part to speak to that productivity part you mentioned, right? It reminded me of um I have a friend who owns like an orchard, and inside the orchard they have those little like a hose that feeds the orchard one by one, and they switched their hose from like a spray model to those ones where it has a drip, right? And he says the fact that he changed that, the way that it's watering the plant, instead of, it was getting watered already, it was spraying, but it was wasted, right? It was because it was spraying the dirt, it was spraying not the actual tree itself. And the fact that they changed it, they reduced water waste by like 37%, right? But then the tree grew twice as big, right? And I'm like, that's a really good point. Like, you mentioned how you use your time for the glory of God. Because yes, I can be doing something and it's not relevant whatsoever, right? But if you choose the right action, it makes the biggest difference. I think it is perfect how you said that.
Right, and it circles back to becoming, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're moving more and more towards success, not knowing how long your life's going to be, but ideally, it's going to be a long life of opportunities to move more and more towards a successful person. And if we're to play that out, tease that out, right? Makes you think of, what do people regret on their deathbed, those kind of things. 80-year-old Daniel, you're sitting there. How would you define the person you hope you have become in that moment?
How would I define it?
What would you call a success? What would you hope to see? How would you lay that out?
Dang, I thought of that.
How would you define 80-year-old Daniel if you say that's success?
Yeah, I really thought of that already.
That's a perspective shifter right there for me.
I remember hearing that from Alex Hormozy. I think he's called the rocking chair effect. If you can imagine. For me, it's like, it's someone who's left a mark in the world where something can work passively. And a good example of that is, I think it was Benjamin Franklin. He'd left $5,000 for the needy, for the city of Boston and Philadelphia, and put it in a CD, so that way every 100 years, the compound interest will be $500,000, and that's strictly for the poor, right? And he just left those two little areas, and I thought, like, for me being 80 years old, knowing that I left that, and when I pass away, my grandkids and those around all the needy, anyone who's needing that kind of support, it's feeding them forever, right? That thing is never gonna leave. So I think I would define success that way. What mark I left, and more importantly, not money wise, but more like the impression wise in the person, because that person can then move that and pass to another person, then another person, and bear a lot of fruit. So it's those two ideas, something passive that can continue without me.
I love that. And do you feel attached to like getting credit for that, or is it just knowing that something can continue to change lives? Like, you can be honest with it. Like,
I've never really,
you know what I mean? Like, do you want Daniel Flowers to be remembered?
I want to be
like,
invisible.
Just knowing something's out there that could keep going and like changing perspectives and like creating positive change.
I think I would rather just have a faceless tool, because then the belief that, hey, the world is out to support me it settles in, versus, oh, Daniel just did something for us. But it was like the world, it feels a little different knowing that it was a faceless name and then I didn't get all the credit. And then someone could ruin my name and then ruin the cause, right? So I think of security.
Yeah, or pull something out of our imperfect past.
Exactly.
Right? It's like the, anonymous quotes that are like the famous ones that are like anonymous. We don't know who said this,
right.
But like it changed a lot of lives, right? Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good point. How about you?
For me, 80-year-old Noah, I think on the topic of becoming, I would want to know that I became, what kind of person would I hope I've become? I think a non-anxious presence, a non-hurried presence, and a person of love. Ultimately, not to sound super spiritual, and I'm also learning not to like feel like I have to preface with things like that, but to be more like Christ. I want to be as close to Christ as possible. And I think that played out tangibly is someone who has been intentional to do the things that you just said. Like, I don't think that's counterintuitive to what you just said one bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just put more of a practical picture to it, but I think we're both saying the same thing here of someone who expands the kingdom, and for us that's creating positive impact, because at the end of the day, why are we here? Why are we all here? You know? And it's not for us. I think we elevate things, and I think the concept of glory is important, like what's going to be glorified with our life, and who will people see with our life.
100%.
I think hopefully they'll see more of him than us,
Right.
and like our face.
That's so true.
So
I love that.
it's one of those things where it can stir me and sound good, but like putting into practice is hard, and it's not as
Easy. Like,
compelling in those hard moments where it's like it's so much easier to choose the easy route or to make it about me.
that's so true.
Does that make sense?
That's so true. I heard that today. It was the commitment consistency rule. If people are more likely to do things that act in accordance of their identity, so the more you can make deposits into their identity, you'll subconsciously react, right? So I think even though it's hard, just start adding deposits when it's easy, so that way when it comes down for a big deposit or withdrawal, it's a lot easier to just take action without thinking. So that's from Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. So
Yeah. I know you've mentioned that multiple times. I need to read that one. Got to put it on the shelf, man.
and then never read it again.
Got to put it on the shelf.
That's so true.
I do want to share, like, I think I've shared with you before, and I've shared multiple times, and I'm still working on this. But I had a coach offer me his time for free, which was super generous. And he shared his story, and it just hit home. And it made me realize he really focused on this aspect of becoming, and that's what he does as a coach, is help people become the person they're called to be. But he said he realized that he was falling more in love with the idea of who he wanted to be or the marriage he wanted to have. And then he would just react in the moments where like it wasn't living up to that picture, versus realizing it's about taking the actions to become the person that will one day become that. And like realizing he was just living in the end, and then just always reacting because we're not there yet. Does that make sense? So he shared about apologizing to his wife, and dude, I turned around the same day. I'm like, that's convicting. I'm going to apologize to mine. I'm like, I know there's a lot of areas I need to work on.
That's true.
Of being more sacrificial to become the person I need to be to build the marriage we want to have, right?
Yes.
So, and I think what that comes down to is service and sacrifice, because that creates intimacy.
That's so true.
And intimacy bears fruit in that relationship. So I think sacrifice is just huge across the board. Across the board.
That's a huge one, because like I heard that several times over. That can apply to any relationship, whether it's with your children, your spouse, co-workers, mentors, clients. Like there's these relationships in your life, and the fact that you just taking that one step, right? Like it could be a small one, like an apology, just like you mentioned. It's a call set in motion. I think Tony Robbins says, if you do what you've done in the beginning of the relationship, there will never be an end, right? And it's like for me, I put it on my to-do list, which you've got me addicted to now, to create 2 meaningful moments with my family. So the first one this week I accomplished with my wife was I sent a voice note, and I sent it to her through Loom, telling her how much I appreciate her. It was random. I've never sent any voice notes ever, so it was different. It was definitely a moment. And she sent me a picture like crying, right? Like because she was in a different room. And then 3 days later, I put another one on Facebook because I've never done that before for her. So I try to do things that are very small in nature, right? Just a minute each. But the fact that it's different, it's like, oh, well, this gives variety. But it's also the little things, right? That was free to do.
Recognition, man. People want to be known. We all want to be known.
Yeah.
And you can't wait. We're all waiting to feel it from someone else before we give it. I say we all, but like that's my tendency, right? It's like we want to operate when we feel like it, and if we're not getting it, then it's like it's kind of like this whole like, well, is it disingenuous because I don't feel like doing it? I don't think it is. I think it's fighting for the perspective, doing it, fighting for gratitude, and I think it comes back around. I really do.
That's crazy. You could do that to anyone. So I did it for my son too.
Yeah.
And I have one more for him this week. So I'm glad that you cemented that. And if anything,
I love that.
This call is definitely, this podcast have been different from the most, but I feel like you can still walk away with something, right? Even Alex Hormozy says the most beneficial thing that the Christian faith have done was to create or coin the term, what would Jesus do, right? Jesus would go and wash your feet, right? He would go out of his way to show you that he cares, and you can apply that to anyone, right? I think he washed it with his hair, though, right?
That was a lady who gave all of her
oil, right?
All of her oil, which was
that
like
was
all the
her
wealth
best
she
thing
had
over him, right? And it made you,
and she knew it was
and
all
it was
his.
valuable.
It was
They
all
said
for
it was
him.
like that was worth like $300 if it was back in the day for that perfume. And it made me think like, if you can plant those seeds. You don't have to have $300 worth of stuff, but the perception of it, you can change someone's life today by showing the perception of how much you put into a thought for them and make it meaningful, right? So to make it tied to them and show that you put some time into it, I think that's enough to show like, hey, that was worth $100. You know what I mean?
Totally.
That's a good one.
Totally.
It's a really good one.
I like that. That really summed up how I was thinking, like, okay, how do we wrap up all this to be practical?
Yeah.
And I really like the 80-year-old question. So if you were to write that down and really think, maybe wrap into like, what regrets do you not want to have? And it's probably going to be very relational, but like write that down, and then what kind of habits, what kind of values, right? We're getting kind of the manifesto stuff of like having a mental map for your life, the map that works to become that person that ends at that destination. And then just taking it down into each day and each moment. And I think ultimately taking the time to pull up out of the weeds, out of the forest, right? And I think we all want to be, if we do that, we're going to be less reactive. We're going to be more like responding because we're thinking like, what do we stand for? Who do we want to become? And I would wrap that up with like the challenging question, like, who are we all created to become?
That's a really good point.
Big picture. And then like maybe just go down from there for yourself,
a really good
what
one.
that looks like for you.
That's a really good one. I like that. I like that.
Any final thoughts, my man?
I think this one, when you just mentioned that, looking up and seeing where you're at, Tony Robbins says, like, if you look back at the process of airplane pilots and their flights, when they fly to Hawaii, they're off course 40% of the time. So consistently looking at where they're at, they're looking at where they need to go, and they readjust course to get there, and they'll get there, right? But the fact that they're not looking at the tools of life, right, in front of them, where it shows the compass and the altitude and where we're at, like even without GPS, that's how they used to fly their way there. They would have to readjust, make a change, and get back there. So pretend you're a pilot and ask yourself, how will I get to my point at 80 years old? And just keep looking up. Oh yeah, and adjust course, because everyone's going to fall off course.
Exactly. Yeah, the worst thing we can do is beat ourselves up.
It's like, imagine the pilot says, I'm off.
Right.
The pilot says, I'm off course. Let's just go this way now. Like, where are we going?
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
Real quick, I heard a really good little nugget. This guy, he was like rage, like anger out the wazoo growing up, like into his 40s. Like he would just berate himself anytime something went wrong. And it was like, it didn't meet his standard internally. And then he had a therapist give him a challenge, and like, we can fix this. He's like, what are you talking about? It took me 40 years to get this angry. Like, there's no way it's going to fix that quick. What they told him to do was, anytime he feels himself getting ready to just get angry and berate himself, to imagine one of his best friends. What would he say to him in that moment? And record that and send it to the therapist. And he said it like within months, like now, like that, he called him Bobby Knight. His internal Bobby Knight's not really recognizable at all anymore. It's that perspective shift right there, right? So I just love that thing. Like, would you say that to the person, one of the people you love the most?
So
not.
when he gets mad, he says, "What would I tell my best friend?" Like I see, that is really really cool. So like it stopped him and changed him. Dang, I like that.
Yeah, think about moms who deal with a lot of mom guilt.
Yeah.
None of them would say they'd go say that to their other mom friend. They would not. They don't believe it for a second about their mom friend. It'd be the same exact situation.
Oh wow.
And is the care and the love there is beautiful. It's just like extending that to ourselves.
That's really cool. Thank you for that. Now my head is swollen with knowledge right now. So
there you go.
Well, thanks for that, brother. It's been real. Another
been a good chat.
definition.
Let's take this as fuel.
Exactly. Right. Sometimes we just need that excitement. Right. See that
Yeah.
hey, not everything has to be structured, just like this call, but you can still walk away with some nuggets. Right.
Absolutely.
That's a good one.
And then go apply
Right.
it, right? If you're watching this, feel free. Make a little comment. Share what success means to you.
Yes.
Love to hear that from other people. I want to start asking more people that.
We should.
So let's start with this video.
And if they find it, if anything, and they share with us, it helps us organize it so that way we can make success a little bit more open source. Right?
A little more open source. Let's do it together. Catch you in the next one, man.
Hey, thanks for watching the Success Open Source Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to subscribe and join the community. Until next time, take care, and let's all make success a little more open source.